In August 1934, the Royal Navy began the G&H class destroyer of 1,350 tons. The second of these was Garland, which was started August 22, 1934, and was completed March 3, 1936. They were okay destroyers for their time and would see extensive service, really making a name for themselves around Norway, and they paid for it. Most didn't survive the war. As completed, they kind of did everything okay, but nothing well. Their main guns weren't dual purpose, and their medium and light anti-aircraft was insufficient and inadequate. Realistically, though, nobody's was. Their speed was okay, as was their range. Their anti-submarine warfare outfit looked okay on paper, but in reality wasn't ready for what it was about to face. In terms of surface fight, they looked okay-ish. The problem was that wasn't the fight they were going to be fighting. I could go more into about how in the early to mid-30s, the Royal Navy was expecting to fight Japan in the South China Sea and was limited by treaty, but that's for another time. And I can't really blame them for not being able to look into the future. Anyway, staying focused here, on May 3, 1940, Garland was transferred to the Free Polish Navy and was named Garland. There was a problem, though. At the time, she was at Malta, finishing up being repaired after some of her depth charges had prematured and nearly blown her stern off. Like other Gs, she did a lot of time in the Mediterranean and quite a bit of time on Atlantic convoy escort duty. She also did Arctic convoy duty, which means her crew put their lives on the line to run supplies to the Soviets. I'm sure that went over well. Regardless, I'm sure the Poles were happy to have another ship to fight with. Post-war, she was returned to the British and eventually went to the Netherlands. As with other transferred ships, I'm not going to go over her pre-transfer or post-transfer activities or loadouts, and instead just going to focus on her as-served state. Main armament was 4 120mm 45 caliber low-angle guns in 4 single open-backed mounts, 2 forward, 2 aft. One 76mm 45 caliber anti-aircraft open gun was fitted just in front of the rear superstructure, where the rear torpedo mount had been. One quadruple 533mm torpedo mount was fitted at the main deck level on the centerline just behind the rear funnel. 2 depth charge throwers and 1 depth charge rack was fitted for 20 depth charges. Propulsion was provided by 3 boilers, 2 venting to the forward funnel and 1 venting to the aft funnel. These provided steam to the 2 turbines, each driving a propeller for 34,000 horsepower. Top speed was 36 knots. 1 Type 121 sonar was fitted. Modifications were normal for her class. From early 1941, she landed Y turret to carry more depth charges, increasing her complement to 70. Types 271 and 286 radar were fitted. From June to August 1943, she switched her B turret for a Hedgehog launcher, exchanging her 76mm gun for 2 57mm 6-pound 47 caliber anti-aircraft guns, and got the new Type 144 sonar instead of the older 121. Entering service with the Poles in May 1940 at Malta, she mostly escorted convoys around the eastern Mediterranean, including Operation Hats, until mid-September when she sailed from Alexandria to Gibraltar. You could still do that in 1940, and on to England. Now with the home fleet and operating in the Atlantic in mid-November 1940, she hit a storm which sent her back to port for repairs. With repairs and overhaul completed, at the end of February 1941, she escorted Atlantic convoys until August, when she escorted the invasion of Spitzbergen. The next month, September, she joined Pyrrhon and others in escorting the Halberg convoy to Malta and back to England, where she arrived at the end of the month. She returned to convoy escort until February 1942, when she went in for overhaul. Completing refit at the start of May 1942, she escorted the Russian-bound PQ-16 convoy. While doing so on May 27th, She was moderately damaged by near misses and put into Murmansk at the end of the month for emergency repairs. At the end of June, she escorted QP-13 from Murmansk back to England, where she went in for permanent repairs. With repairs completed, she returned to escorting Atlantic convoys until February 1943, when she again went in for a refit. In March and April, she again escorted Atlantic convoys until going back in May for another refit. With upgrades completed in September, she joined Burza and other ships of the escort carrier Fencers Group in the October Operation Alacrity, the peaceful occupation of the Portuguese-controlled Azores. At the end of 1943, she transferred to Freetown to escort convoys along the West Africa route. This lasted until May 1944, when she joined the Eastern Mediterranean Fleet and aided in the liberation of islands in the Aegean. Despite a depth charge explosion which moderately damaged her, she continued on with this work until November, when she returned to England for repairs and refit. The European War ended in May 1945, with her still undergoing post-refit trials, and she next ran supplies to Belgium and Holland and aiding in the occupation of German ports. Finally, she and her crew took part in Operation Deadlight, the scuttling of German submarines. Being a British ship on loan, she finally wrapped up her service with the Polish Navy and was returned to the Royal Navy.